You're listening to EMF AM.
Welcome to the official podcast for the EMF Action Network. My name is Mark Keither, your host and publisher, and this is podcast number 2. On our program today, we are going to be talking about electromagnetic hypersensitivity with Julie Levine from California. The EMF Action Network is an organization dedicated to providing discussion on topics concerning the overgrown spread of wireless technology in our lives and how it affects our well-being. Each show features different guests and is distributed primarily through podcasts on iTunes and YouTube. Each podcast presents different guests who present their point of view and stories concerning the exorbitant expansion of wireless technology in our culture. Topics include electromagnetic hypersensitivity, mobile or cellular phone dangers, Wi-Fi usage, smart meter concerns, cell tower hazards, health concerns on EMF or microwave radiation, and more. So without any further ado, let's move on to our featured guest today. And our guest today is Julie Levine. Julie is with us today from California, and she's involved in a number of projects that we're going to talk today about the things that she's involved in, as well as especially electromagnetic hypersensitivity. So, Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here.
Good. So, I just to get started here, in regards to electromagnetic hypersensitivity, which I'm just for the program going to refer to as EHS to make it easier. Can you give us just like a brief overview of what that is, maybe to someone who's not familiar with what EHS is or has never heard of it before?
Sure, and I just want to say, as by way of a caveat, that I didn't know anything about this until I myself became sensitive. So this has been a learning curve, but I think we've become somewhat of the experts. Electrosensitivity, EHS, would be when you have a reaction and have a particularly difficult time handling wireless electricity. Most often what's called microwave pulse radiation. It uses, like what a microwave oven uses, a type of radiational pulse, which is going constantly. With the microwave, you cook your food and then it's over. But with cell phone towers, cell phones, Wi-Fi, and now smart meters, these are pulses that go pretty much constantly, many, many, many pulses every second, all day and all night. And these pulses have been classified by the World Health Organization as a Class 2B carcinogen. That having been said, there's quite a lot of evidence, research, and that's led to pressure on the World Health Organization to reclassify this in terms of a more serious form of radiation with definite links to cancer. I think we know this most frequently in terms of brain tumors and things from holding cell phones near your head, this kind of thing. But in fact, it's much more insipid in terms of the impact it's having on many, many, many people, both proximity to cell phone towers, a lot of cell phones in use in the immediate area, and or these smart meters which use the same pulse to communicate with the utility company on your energy use. So some of the symptoms that people get from this include like dizziness, nausea, heart palpitations and arrhythmias, sleep difficulties, insomnia, and sleep maintenance problems like being woken up with a pulse or waking up vomiting or with dizziness and heart problems, nervousness, irritability, changes in hearing and vision, usually decreased ability to hear and see, these are some of the symptoms that we are seeing. And then, of course, down the line would be rashes and cancers.
Right, of course. And one of the first things you mentioned the World Health Organization. One thing I did look at recently is that it looks like as early as 1996, they had started a initiative known as the EMF Project. Is that something that you've heard of before?
I have not per se heard of that, and I would be very interested in hearing what you know about it. I do know that there has been a great effort on the part of the telecommunications companies, which are funding our government to the tune of like hundreds of billions of dollars a year. There's been a huge push by them to shove down any evidence related to cell phone towers, or wireless electricity and its effects on health. And therefore, there's been no research done here in the United States that looks at what is the impact of this increase of wireless energy in our environments. All of us have this. I myself have a meter, and I look at it's like a meter that measures EMF and radio frequencies, and it just shows that even where I live, the levels just continue to go up and up and up. And this is true for everyone as they continue to place more of these harmful radiating types of devices in our immediate vicinity.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, the excuse me, the project that I was mentioning, the EMF project, I discovered on the World Health Organization's website. It's actually been around, I guess, since 1996, and there's actually a brochure that you can actually print out about that. And I think, if I read the information correctly, there are regular meetings that are held in regards to that. And I think I even saw one of the next meetings is actually going to be held in South Africa. But that's something, again, that's been around for 20 years. I'm not sure if they've made any significant progress, except for maybe the fact that the class 2B carcinogen notation for wireless radiation. But when one discovers that they have EHS, is there any particular resource that one should turn to first, especially, as, most doctors, even more than most, are not educated on how to handle this, relatively new phenomenon? Is there any sort of place that they can reach out to?
Well, yes, there are places. There are organizations that do assist with this. One of them is called StopSmartMeters.org. I think that's based in the Bay Area. There's also Citizens for a Radiation-Free Environment. There's a number of groups that if you even put up, EMF-sensitive resources, you will find resources, usually by groups like the ones that I'm involved with that have just sprung up because of the large numbers of people that have become ill from this radiation and the fact that they have had a lack of response from government and corporations that are responsible for energy. So, there are resources like that. There are a number of Facebook groups. I myself administer a Facebook group. It's actually a Facebook page called No Smart Meter Coalition that covers issues on smart meters, but we also deal with issues related to Wi-Fi and cell phones and cell phone towers, health issues, and some of the political issues behind it, the profits and whatnot that are being generated. So there are resources like that. There are doctors that do have some level of specialization in looking at these sensitivities and are beginning to do tests around it. There's an effort to get this classified as a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which would be very huge in terms of requiring accommodation.
That's a very a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to ask in regards to that. What is the biggest challenge to get EHS recognized by the American Disabilities Act? What would need to happen?
Well, it would require, to my knowledge, I'm not an attorney, so there is an attorney working on this. But as I understand it, it would require an acknowledgement that this is a real illness. It's very easy. Oftentimes, one of the ways that, the American Medical Association, the pharmaceuticals and whatnot, will deal with illnesses that they prefer not to acknowledge is by constantly reinforcing kind of the notion that these are people who are somewhat crazy, loony bins, tinfoil hats, this kind of thing, which becomes another way not to take their ailments seriously. There are people who are so ill from this that they literally cannot leave their homes. I sleep in a Faraday cage, which is a completely enmeshed wire mesh thing that I built, was built for me, that keeps radio waves out when I sleep. Otherwise, I cannot sleep. So there are many, many, many people who are sick from this stuff. They need a classification that this, in fact, is a real condition. Just to give a couple examples, Lyme disease, or another one would be the mono-like viruses that are now known as yuppie virus, this kind of thing. Many of these illnesses were deemed, fibromyalgia. They were deemed, basically in people's heads, psychosomatic illnesses, which is the way that many people are viewing this type of EHS syndrome. And so it's just a question of enough cases and basically beating down walls and getting the right lawyers and doctors working with us, which I think we're beginning to put the pieces in place. I see a lot more recognition among the general public that this is a problem, and a lot more interest in calling attention to it.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of great things right there, and that kind of brings me to, in regards to, there's many products out there that claim, especially on the internet, many products out there that claim to be able to reduce symptoms for EHS.
Yeah.
And I look at a whole bunch of these, and to me some of them look very realistic, but some of them just look a little questionable, or it could be a hoax or just something out there to make money with really having no effect or real value. Is there anything that is more or less realistic than others in terms of offering protection?
Well, yes. As you said, where there's a problem, there tends to be a proliferation of products and people wanting to make money to try to resolve the problem, and mixed in with that are people who really have ideas and, are on the right page. I find that, for instance, shielding materials. So radio waves are sound waves. They're a type of a sound wave. They actually have a wavelength. These are things, again, I've learned, from my own experience, right?
Yeah, well, that's something I wasn't aware of.
Yes, and so being that they're wave waves and the waves have a particular size to them, if you create a barrier to them, which could be something like, for instance, my fiance is a sound engineer, and he's taught me some about, the fact, when sound engineers are, there, let's say they're doing a concert for a pop star, whatever it is, they need to make sure there is no sound coming in from any other source, including any radio waves. They cannot have anything interfering with the quality of the sound. That's why when you go into a recording studio, they're usually made out of solid steel. Now, solid metal will provide a natural barrier to sound waves. However, so will a mesh material. You don't have to have solid metal as long as the holes in the metal are small enough that they're smaller than the actual sound waves. So that's why I use a Faraday cage, and there's some precedent. You can look these up. Some of them are grounded, connected to an electricity. Some of them are not. There's different opinions on that. But I say, the main thing is if you're feeling not well, see what, makes you feel better. For me, it would be just screening for those sound waves, for those radio waves. So, for example, there is a new material out. I haven't tried it, but I have measured it, which is like a window screening material. So houses provide, depending on what the houses are made of, or a certain amount of natural screening. I've been looking into shipping container homes, because shipping containers are naturally made of solid metal. But when you do something like that, you need to create windows, and windows do tend to leak because there's not a perfect seal, a certain amount of electromagnetic radiation. So there is new materials that screen the windows, that shield the windows with, I don't know if it's if it has metal in it or how it works. But we've actually tested some of these materials. I work with a local electrical engineer who's becomes aware of these problems, and we found that this material that they now have to shield windows is quite effective. We measure it with our meters, and we see that it is in fact shielding. So things like that are quite helpful. The materials you use in building are important. There are people who find that tinfoil hats, particularly if they use a lot of layers of tinfoil on it, does provide some relief for them when they're like traveling and things like that, and they don't have the option of avoidance.
Yeah,
But ultimately avoidance is the best. If you can avoid it, which you can't always do, that's going to be the most effective.
Yeah, for myself, because I have EHS as well, and one of the things that I've tried, which has had, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I have one thing that's available on several websites is you can get what looks like a baseball cap, which has material built into it called NatraShield, which is basically a fabric with a very light steel mesh built into this white fabric. You look at it, it looks like regular cloth, almost like with a very small checkered pattern. And that's been helpful to some success. But it only just wearing a hat on your head doesn't really block a whole lot of everything that's out there. But it certainly was a good step for me in the right direction.
Well, protecting your head is very, very important. Because our heads are particularly sensitive.
Yeah, for myself, I feel like that's where most of the my discomfort is happening. Another thing that comes to mind, talking about being able to block out the environment and things like that, in terms of places that people with EHS can live. It sounds like it, for someone that has at least a moderate amount of EHS, things like because we have Wi-Fi and we have DECT phones, that's something that really scares me. But with those types of technologies, it sounds like a person really needs to have total control of the environment, and places like large apartment buildings, and things like that really limits a person on where they can live, and maybe an independent house is really their only option, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's an interesting point you're raising, and you're kind of right in the midst of, I think, what the most important issue is for people like ourselves, which is that yes, we ultimately need to have safe housing, but it really doesn't exist anymore. I myself have been looking for a place to live, and I also serve as a resource for other people across the country that are looking for safe houses or safe communities. And the bottom line is that they don't exist. The levels of radiation are just going up and up and up. Because there is no designation of, this as a real ailment, there's no limitations placed on, the building materials that are being used and the stuff that's in the, the larger environment. And it's really, really severely problematic. So, I'll go looking for a place to live. First of all, almost every place has smart meters. Okay, and then secondly, and those are extremely problematic, the frequency that they use in the smart meters is a 900 megahertz pulse. This is a pulse that used to be used in cell phones, but they changed cell phones, and I think it was a lawsuit that resulted in the change, because it was found that this particular pulse was very insidious and very, very, very harmful to the health. To people's health, to have that constant pulse, which is why they changed the pulse on cell phones. And yet they had that megahertz available because it was no longer being used for cell phones, and guess what? This is exactly what they decided to use for this smart meter program. So the same thing that they stopped using because of the severe problems with human health, they're now using again for the smart meter program. And honestly, on the rental, the law, at least, I don't know if it's a law. I should be careful how I speak, but at least Southern California Edison, where I live, claims that they will not put in a analog meter, that's the old school meters that don't have this radiation,
Yes.
in a rental unit. So if you are renting a house, if you do not have enough money to buy a house, you're pretty much going to be stuck with a smart meter, even if the landlord would be very happy not to use one. They are now told that they must. They have no choice. So that gives you an idea of how problematic it is. And if you're trying to find a place to live, good luck. Good luck. Because it just doesn't exist out there for people. You can put in a Faraday cage to try to protect yourself when you're sleeping, but nobody wants to be in a cage all the time.
Right.
And also, people want to be in the world. People are being stuck to, forced to be very isolated from other human contact because of these sensitivities.
And I think it's important to point out that in regards to the sensitivity, people have various different levels of this condition. There are people who are only minorly affected, where they might be on their cell phone for maybe an hour, and then they'll start to feel kind of sick or ill. But then on the other hand, you might have someone moderate who might have more difficulties around things like Wi-Fi on a regular basis, and needs to abstain from places that have that. And then you have really extreme cases where someone developed the condition early on, even before we had this huge increase of electromagnetic radiation in our world, and someone that might have to live in a place like Green Bank, West Virginia, which is in the national radio quiet zone. So
but I have to say that that's not a solution,
of course,
at all. First of all, I do know people who've gone there, and it is not in any way EMF free. It is just free of other EMFs that are not related to the actual telescope and equipment that's being used there by the government.
Right.
So it's quite high in EMF. It's just their EMF that they're using for their studies.
Right. Yeah. It's the National Radio Quiet Zone in West Virginia has been around for a very long time. It was actually developed for telescopes for looking into space, as I recall, to keep them free. As you say, from the interference that comes from outside radio frequencies. So, but many people have migrated there, believing that, and some are correct, and that it does limit and make them feel better. They say it's not perfect, but it's as close as you can get to a relatively free EMF environment. One of the people that I've corresponded with there has actually indicated that many people, which surprised the heck out of me, journalists and media do come there to interview them, but they say that when their interviews are put out for publication in whatever organization they belong to that are coming to interview them, that they're not giving the real world the whole picture. They're only giving them a sliver of what the situation right is.
Well, we're in a situation right now with Citizens United and basically the determination that corporations are human beings, where you have these corporations. Some of them are so-called quasi-public authorities, like our energy providers. So they're for-profit, but they are working kind of in lieu of government, authorized by government to represent us. And yet, really, what they're representing is profits. And they have a lot of money to throw at problems based on their determination that they're problems. And that includes throwing money at stuff so that it will not come back to hurt them in a lawsuit. So, it's great that people are going out and interviewing them, but they will very quickly be approached by some of these corporations and given a lot of money not to publish this stuff. And I think that's what's going on right now. I'm seeing just about in every new legislation pushing more cell phone towers and giving less time to respond or fight them or anything else, including in California, the AB 57, is that there are corporations and a lot of money behind every one of them.
Right, of course. I know that you mentioned, we were corresponding earlier before we were on the phone. You mentioned that you're involved in several different organizations, and you wanted to touch on that a little bit. I know you've been involved to stop the installation, I guess, of 80 plus cell towers with
Yes.
People's Initiative and some other
Yes.
organizations.
Yes. Yes. Basically, what happened was we found out that the county here, LA County, and there are programs if people are living in other places listening to this podcast, be aware that this is going on all over the country with just different names and this kind of thing. But anyway, they're planning very quickly to put in, like, at the time about 140. It was since reduced to about 70 or 80. Very large cell phone towers under a program called LA RICS, which was LA Regional Interagency Coalition, whatever. Basically, these are towers to be used exclusively by law enforcement, Homeland Security, NSA, police, fire, whatever, not used by the people. And they're claiming that they really need these in order to have better communication. And they were put in initially without any public hearing process whatsoever, because it was deemed as needed, for security. This new Homeland Security stuff that they're using now. And we were concerned because there was a tower that was being put in our community that would have affected. First of all, they were putting it in the fire station, which was many of these cases they're putting them in the fire stations. And the the firemen were totally opposed to it. They were like, they knew it was bad for their health. They did not want this tower. They did not feel it was necessary. They said they already had excellent communication with all levels of government. And they were a part of fighting it, which did help us out in our efforts. We were able to work with the firemen, which, they have quite a lot of legitimacy because they're doing such wonderful work for all of us. So that was what was happening. We were able to stop it in our community. The usual government people, including Democrats and Republicans, were absolutely behind these towers. It did turn out that there was a lot of funding involved from Motorola and other large telecommunications companies. And, there was a cover-up going on, where you even had the LA-wide chief of fire supporting it at the same time that his, the fire people, firemen and women, were fighting against it. Anyway, what we started to do once we called attention to it locally, we were able to stop it. First thing that we did was we got a legal. I forget the name of that. When you get a legal thing that you can't. You have to go through a public hearing process. So we were able to get that. Yeah, an injunction. So we were able to get an injunction and a public hearing process. And in Topanga, we were able to fight it. People did not really want it, and so we were able to prevent it from happening. Although they tried to make a case for how this has no harmful effect whatsoever, which is always what they do, and also that why it was needed. But we were able to fight it. So we said, gee, we have a precedent here. What's going to happen with the other, 70-something, 80-something towers that are planned for around LA County? So we decided, well, we might as well go around and talk to them as well. And so we looked at where they were located, and they were located within 15, 20 miles of where we live. And so we literally went door to door in every area where they were planning to put towers. Well, not in every area, but I'd say we covered about 6 communities in the San Fernando Valley here in LA. And we did it in English and Spanish. Very important to know who your constituency is in those communities. And in this instance, they were primarily Spanish speakers, and many of them. And all we did, we had a leaflet done in Spanish and in English. And we talked to them about the harms of these towers, the fact that they were being planned without their consent or any public hearing process, that it could harm their children, it could harm their, especially seniors. We talked about some of the data we have about it. And people called their supervisors and counsel people and stopped it. So we were able to stop them in every single community where we reached out, which we felt was a very effective use of our time, because these were two people going out and in literally an hour per site stopping a large cell phone tower that was going to harm a lot of people. And we felt our time was very well used. It's a good feeling when you feel that you can make a difference, and it's not that much time involved.
Yeah, of course. And one of the things that you mentioned was the fire station issue. I do remember hearing a while back a study that I know that Dr. Magda Havas in Canada, in Ontario, was involved with in regards to fire stations and the radiation, and that might have been related to what you described there. So it's certainly happening in other countries as well, and certainly getting into schools and children. Something else that we've discussed on previous podcasts, and that's one thing that really disturbs me is the grotesque level of Wi-Fi that's invaded the classroom.
Oh, I know.
For elementary students. Given their limited development, physically they're more prone to being susceptible to that kind of radiation. And, to have it constant there, 8 hours a day, and I'll take my own high school. They've added a whole Wi-Fi system maybe 3 or 4 years ago by an anonymous donor. It was paid for, and every student there has a wireless computer. And it's one thing when I think about say one computer in a room using Wi-Fi, but when I think with the teacher in front of the room and 20 or 25 of these students with their laptops out using wireless technology all in a single room. It's if that isn't disturbing, I don't know what is.
Yes. Here in LA, we have a couple of cases where teachers have won accommodations, which I think is again, the beginning of what ultimately could be affect the ADA, make this an ADA eligible sickness. But there are teachers who've become sick from this in LAUSD, which is the school district here, classes. And they've had to they have gotten accommodations in the schools. But what about the students, as you say? And oftentimes the parents aren't even aware of this. It's a big, big, big problem. And it's everywhere. It's just everywhere, not only in terms of the Wi-Fi in the classes, but, that all of the people are right now, the biggest market in things is wireless things. Baby monitors and ways to put radio frequencies on your wrist to measure how much exercise you're getting. So many of these ways now that we're being covered in radiation, and these products are being touted as though somehow they're healthy for you, when in fact we know better.
Yeah, in regards to the going back to the ADA again, I wonder if that is something that would get approved. If someone was in a large building, or let's say it's a school or just a medium-sized business, and there's Wi-Fi in that building. Okay, the person's sensitive to Wi-Fi, and if it's a disability, is listed. The way I understand it is that an accommodation can be provided if it does not provide undue hardship for the company. And I'm just kind of wondering if that was if EHS was approved, and to relieve the issues that the person with the disability has, would be to remove Wi-Fi from the building. Would that be considered an undue hardship, and then the employee having to leave their job?
I can't see that there would be undue hardship in removing Wi-Fi from a public classroom. I don't know how somebody would get away with calling that undue hardship.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I want to be careful here because, I'm a social worker by training, and I come from a family of lawyers. And one thing I do know is that, I'm not a lawyer, so I really can't give legal advice. It would be great to get a lawyer on this show to talk to, because I do believe that there's, plenty to be discussed in terms of, what we can accomplish on a legal basis.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's my goal, we're just starting our podcasts here, but, my vision, if you will, is to have 100 of these podcasts available on the internet. So someone can go to the EMF Action Network, someone who might, just be learning that they have EHS symptoms or that type of condition, and, be able to give real hope to, someone who really needs it. And, also, I hope, give a guideline to the journal media about, what really should be covered in regards to electromagnetic sensitivity and wireless radiation dangers in general.
Yes. Yeah, well, I have to say, for all that, I do not see a terrific direction when it comes to human rights and people's rights versus corporate rights, where because they have all the money to throw at all of these issues, they're the ones that are kind of making out like bandits at everybody else's expense. That having been said, I do believe that there is going to be some movement and a recognition that this is hurting people, because there's a lot of good people that are fighting very hard on this, and with legal help, and I think it's going to make a difference.
Yeah, and it already has made a difference in other countries, certainly Sweden,
Yes.
where it is recognized, and then moving into France, where they've recently banned Wi-Fi in young classrooms.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll continue to see that move along.
I mean, but like, for instance, most of the world has now legally stopped genetically modified crops, but the United States primarily is selling only genetically modified crops, which means that most countries are no longer taking those crops that are made in the United States. But again, because the corporations have so much control here, that's still what is being produced, even though most of the world has said no.
Right.
They don't understand why we're eating this stuff that has insecticides in it and has been linked to, all kinds of health problems. So, the fact that it's happening around the world is great. And again, it's part of the solution, but we still have an uphill battle to make it acknowledged here.
Yeah, definitely we do. So, is there anything else that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about?
No, I think it's been a very comprehensive interview.
Good. All right, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up here then. Again, thank you, Julie, so much for being on the show here today. You've been listening to Julie Levine from California. And you said you have a Facebook page. Is there a place that you can be reached, or that a person can look at your pages?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, it's a very comprehensive page. People can also post to it. You just go to Facebook and just write "No" with spaces, right? No Smart Meter Coalition. 4 words. No Smart Meter Coalition. That is a Facebook page, and that will put you right into it. I am Julie Levine, and I'm also the administrator of that page, and absolutely, I'm here to be of assistance.
All right, great. So thanks again, Julie, for being on our program, and have a good rest of the day. Again, you've been listening to Julie Levine in California. Thank you for listening to our program today. Special thanks to our guest, Julie Levine. You can find out more about our program by going to the EMF Action Network Facebook page. You can also find more about our shows on the EMF Action Network channel on YouTube. Please keep watching for more podcasts to be posted soon, and may your shadow fall on pleasant places. Have a great day.